Hi, hello everyone. This is our first interview ever as a society where we've got the lead composer for various titles up there who's been working in the industry longer than most of us have been alive. It's Robin Beanland.
Hello.
Right, something that a lot of these people won't know, we'll start with this. How did you get into music? Because it's quite nice and tied to our society, I'd say.
So music, yeah. So age 7, handed a trumpet by my folks. My brother got a clarinet, I got the trumpet. And then, so I lived in Leeds at the time. And then went to the Yorkshire College of Music for lessons, trumpet lessons. And then went on to, once I got to a sort of certain grade, started playing in the various brass bands, concert bands, orchestras, a lot of which took place down at Leeds then College of Music. So that's how I started. I did all my sort of grades, my associated board grades up to grade 8. And then when I got to grade 8, I was like, I really want to sort of get into, I was starting to listen to trumpet players like Miles Davis, and I loved Kind of Blue. And I sort of said to my folks, I really want to sort of get into, because I've been playing sort of classical stuff and a lot of brass band stuff. I'd like to sort of play more sort of improvised stuff. So I started having lessons with, I think it was the head of light music at Leeds College. He was called Dick Horden. And the first thing he said was, you need to get yourself a keyboard, because obviously I'm just used to playing notes off the stave and 1 note at a time. He said, you need to get some chordal knowledge. So got the keyboard. Immediately, as soon as I did that, the lads at my school said, oh, you've got a keyboard, do you want to come and join our band? They were a rock band. I went, yeah, okay. So when I started playing keys for them, that kind of switched completely to playing keyboards in a band. So I did that for quite a few years. That kind of started to get quite serious. We all sort of pursued that for quite a few years. We had, I suppose, the high point of that was we had a Radio 1 session on the Tommy Vance rock show. So did that for a while. Then the band, that kind of petered out, singers not getting on with guitarists, various that sort of stuff. And I started looking at what I could do. I was thinking like I'd like to get into TV stuff. So I started working for a composer in Leeds called Christopher Norton. I don't know if you've heard of him. He writes a lot of books for Boozy and Hawks called Microjazz. It's quite a popular series. So I did a lot, kind of went to work in his studio and did sort of TV stuff and various things, various library albums and things like that with him. I managed to kind of start building up a show reel. Yeah. And I probably did that for about 2 years. And then it was my brother actually came to me with a Edge magazine, which was a fairly sort of new publication at the time. And a company in a place called Twycross were looking for musicians, composers. So sent a tape in. Everything was on tape then. So put my show reel onto a tape, sent that in, and got an interview down there. They gave me like a brief to write some music for the interview. They said, "We'll take this away, have a listen to it." And a month later, they said, "Yeah, would you like a job at Rare?" So that was back in April 1994.
Was that for that prompt? Was that for a particular game, or was it for just like a kind of open-ended prompt for just the interview?
I think it was probably because it was probably for, I mean, the Rare even then was very, very secretive. So it was, I suppose they had Donkey Kong Country in development, which Dave Wise who was the composer at Rare at the time. And Evelyn Fisher had just started sort of 6 months prior to me. And I think that we had this other game called Killer Instinct, which was an arcade game. And I'm guessing they thought we don't have enough people to create the
All
music.
these titles,
So
yeah.
so it was me. There was me and another guy called Graham Norgate, and we both started on the same day, and we were immediately sort of thrown into the deep end on, right, you're doing the music for this game.
Mm.
And at that time, it was very much games didn't have a lot of memory. So
Yeah.
so it was at the interview they said, if you're successful, you'll be required to do sound effects as well. Is that all right? I was like, yeah, no problem. That's because they just they couldn't justify having. Well, I suppose in-house wasn't the norm at all for any sort of games companies. I think music and audio tended to be a bit of an afterthought.
Yeah.
But
From what I hear about other companies such as Nintendo, a lot of it was just, what do we have on our sound library, our Foley CDs and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it was just kind of like a lot of people made games and then they'd get somebody to write a bit of music for it. But it was the sort of in-house thing was, I think it still is. It's quite. It's quite
novel still, which is surprising given that it's been over 20 years. But you're still kind of in a unique situation at Rare where, rather than hiring someone to write for your game, you just walk down the hallway and go, oh, could you work on this or something along the lines.
Yes, yeah. And I think it certainly in the case of something like Sea of Thieves, there's the things like the shanty system. I don't think that would work if we were trying to contract that out of house. Because there's an awful lot of iteration that has to go along to sort of get that working and code and things, an instrument that plays and will move around in a 5-1, 7-1 sound space and stay in sync with anybody else that joins in it with at that point of the song decides to join in on their instrument and they all sync up and still move around, and things like whose plays first gets the melody, who joins in gets the backing, that sort of thing. So I think that would be quite a hard thing to do.
Yeah,
I think because we went through a lot of iteration.
I'll go back to what we were talking about you, Killer Instinct, because we'll come back to that later. I've got a list of things to get through.
Okay, yeah.
I can't remember what we're talking about. We're talking about Killer Instinct.
I suppose that was my kind of starting point at Rare. Was Killer Instinct in 1994, an arcade machine. So I had no idea prior to the week before starting at Rare. I was working with Chris in Leeds, and he had quite a lot of work that we had to sort of kind of tie up, and we had like a library session in a studio called Snake Ranch in London, which was there's a composer called Harry Gregson Williams. I don't know if you heard of him.
I've heard the name.
he's like a A-list Hollywood composer. At the time, he was working for this library company called Fireworks Music. And we had a session with him, and we were discussing about what you're going to do then. What are you going to? I said, I have no idea what I'm going to be doing when I get there. I don't know if I'm just going to be typing numbers into a keyboard or actually playing parts or what. I have no idea how they're sort of creating their music there. And I remember them going, "Oh, make sure you're getting paid well for that." And there's a bit of kind of like, "What, you're going to go and do games then?" Are you? Okay, it was. But actually, when I arrived at Ray, it was pretty much what I had my MIDI rig, I had my rack of gear, I had my, what did I use at the time, Cubase. And that was pretty much, it just carried on making music the same way. The only difference was I had to squeeze it into 4 meg of memory, 4 megabytes.
This is one of the things I always find, because I've looked a little bit into kind of like not so much the N64, but the SNES, where just putting music into that thing is so complex that
so that was even more restrictive, really. I mean, we kind of landed on our feet because we sort of continued to make music the way we had done. We just had to fit it. We had to mix it in mono, and we had to kind of sort of write music in a way that you could repeat a bit 4 times and then go to the next bit. You had to sort of just think a bit of it that way. Whereas Dave Wise, who was working on DKC, he had a minuscule amount of memory that he could load into, and he had 8 voices. So when I hear things like I mean, I remember him playing the aquatic ambience from Donkey Kong Country, and I was absolutely blown away. I just thought, how on earth are you managing to squeeze this into the SNES? But that's why that's again, I think, the sort of in-house thing where Rare really cared about audio and music.
Just looked up how much RAM the SNES had for audio, and it's about 64 kilobits.
Yes, it was nothing.
Nothing. That's
and Dave actually, Chris Stamper wrote the audio engine for the SNES.
Oh.
And I think that it was all in hex. Because the MIDI stuff was quite expensive. You could actually put MIDI files in, but you had you had a note on and a note off and a duration. So that, whereas hex was a much more efficient way to save on memory, so they could sort of squeeze more into it that way. But it was a bit of a faff because it was all just looking at.
Yeah.
Dave was actually just typing stuff in and getting it to work. He'd do it in MIDI first, and then he'd kind of figure out how he needed to then get that into the SNES. Really quite painstaking.
I've seen a very small explanation on it, and it looks like 5 minutes of music will take a week to type in.
It took a long time.
Yeah.
And he was very, very clever with things like he sampled like a filter at various stages on the cutoff, so that he could emulate a filter on 2 channels. He could emulate doing a filter sweep because he would just crossfade into that sound. Incredible.
That's
work.
Impressive stuff.
Yeah.
Anyway, so Killer Instinct was your first game. That was an arcade cabinet, which obviously more powerful than the home console alternative. And then you went straight onto the early N64 titles. I can't remember which one came first. I think it was Jet Force.
No, so actually I did Killer Instinct 2 as well.
Okay.
We were waiting on the N64 hardware to arrive. So Killer Instinct, it's like we had a team sat there, what we're going to do. So I think memory serves on this, we had 6 months to make the game because it was an arcade machine, and William said, well, the only slot we have in terms of manufacturing, because they had their Mortal Kombat games, they also had their pinball machines. This is the only window we have to actually manufacture the boards for the arcade is here, so that you've got 6 months to hit that date, and if you don't hit it, it's not coming out. So
quite a time pressure.
Yeah, but that was kind of because we were expecting to go into the N64. It didn't. It was sort of late getting the hardware to us, so we put that out, and then Graham converted Killer Instinct to the SNES, and I think I did. Our first game I did was Killer Instinct Gold on the N64.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which ran at 60 frames a second. Nothing
pretty good for the. That's pretty good for the N64, to be honest.
Yeah,
actually, it's quite powerful. Just memory was there. Yeah, which is bring onto it. So obviously, arcade machines, whilst they still had a limit at the time period, but it was almost double what the N64 would have been able to handle in terms of like memory for sound and things. Did you find kind of the work process of getting those arcade tunes and kind of pulling them, squishing them into the N64 much of a
it was different because on the arcade it was one channel for music, 3 channels for sound effects. So the music channel was actual just audio in mono. It was like recorded as you would today.
Yeah.
You just had to squeeze it into mono and then compress the files. But whereas it was on the N64, I had to create those instruments that I was using and multi-sample the notes. So say like you'd sort of do a C, a G, a C, a G, a C, and a G, and then you would spread that on your keyboard, say that was for like a string sample or something like that, string instrument. So I had to recreate the instruments and try and loop them, make them nice and small on the loops, and then I think it had 16 voices, so you had to make sure that the pieces of music didn't go over 16 voices. So if you got like things like release on any sounds, and they're still hanging on. And
that's using a channel, yeah.
So you kind of put them in an order where they could steal. This channel has higher priority than this channel, so it can.
So the occasional cymbal hit's less important than hitting.
Well, cymbals are interesting. Yeah, I mean, even actually on the arcade one, because a cymbal sort of like ringing out over something going. It's like all you're thinking is that's using up memory. That is because it's when you think of like CD audio, was it 10 megabytes for a minute of stereo? And we have 4 megabytes to do the entire music and sound effects. So admittedly, we compressed it down. So so the N64, a cymbal, you just kind of get a cymbal crash cymbal and try and it's hard because it's the waveform's kind of dying off like that, and you're trying to loop it. You kind of getting a mismatch here, so you're trying to crossfade and fatten the waveform out so it kind of loops smoothly, and then put an envelope on it so it can tail off. Nice.
Yeah. I'm aware of this because I've watched quite a few interviews in preparation for this, but one of your tracks from Killer Instinct, you had to cut out about half of it or so, from what I remember. It was on the CD, but it wasn't in the arcade cabinet.
Was that the Sable, the Werewolf one? Was it with the pipe organ and stuff? Probably.
Yes, it might have been.
Yeah, that was one of the first ones I wrote, and I I kind of in my head I had this, the fight could start outside the castle and they could go inside the castle, and that kind of thing. I did this kind of moody, I suppose, Elfman-esque type intro and stuff. And then we put it in and they went, yeah, you've used all the memory. It's just kind of like you had to go, right, okay, we had to just get to the kind of just the pipe. And Killer Instinct was I think it was 90 seconds for a round. No, not was it 90 seconds for an actual?
That feels about right.
Maybe a game, I can't remember, but just had to get down to the sort of the seed of it, I suppose. And
did you write the music for exactly that 90 seconds, or was it these tracks that could loop?
It was just kind of something kind of energetic, and it was kind of quite a steep learning curve. But then when kind of, okay, we get it now. We just need to write music that's kind of energetic and gets people wanting to,
Let's go look over at my
skillfully put their combos together, unlike me who just
you push the different buttons, you push the keyboard. So that kind of brings me onto a thing of working as a composer for so long. There's lots of times where music does get in or it doesn't get in, or something has to change. Are there any kind of moments where over the years where you've had to completely rechange an approach to something? Where we touched on it lightly, but things like Sea of Thieves, where you've got a tune for an event, and then suddenly somebody goes, oh, hang on, we can't do that because this is happening in the gameplay, sort of things.
Yeah, Sea of Thieves is an interesting one. So fairly early on, I wrote some kind of ship combat music for that. And Greg, the designer on it, Greg Mails, said, yeah, we're not sure what the problem with writing ship music. So my thinking was, when two ships get in kind of a certain proximity, we could start this music, and Greg was like, I don't really want to do that, because we're sort of almost dictating the emotion to the player, and we don't want to do that with Sea of Thieves. We don't want to what did he say? We don't want to infer an emotion that the player isn't having. So he said they may want to just sail up to each other and give each other stuff or play shanties together. But if we start playing that music, they're going to just start firing cannons at each other. So, okay, that's fair enough. So we scaled that right back to just stings. If you fired a cannon and you hit another ship, then you would get a sting to say you've done that, like a flourish. And only you, nobody else on the crew would hear it. It's just you. And if you didn't mean to hit them, and it did, you still got it, because it's like, well, you hit them whether you didn't mean to do or not. You still fired a cannonball and it hit the ship. So we scaled it right back to that. I think that was really good. It's a really interesting approach.
One of the moments I like for that is when you spot an enemy ship and you've got that kind of, oh wow, I've found something, and then it turns sinister slightly towards the end. So you've got that, oh, I don't know where they are.
Yeah. So I suppose that's an example of something kind of, okay, we scaled it right back to just stings.
Yeah.
I mean, there's been moments since where we'll kind of lean into the music a lot more. There's stuff that's kind of a bit more narrative. Things like, I suppose one of the first things we did was you'd get a skelly ship encounter, so it's therefore that thing's going to come out of the sea next to you, and so we keep the music off there because it's like, well, yeah, that's definitely happening. It's not they're going to try and sink you, so let's score that with some music.
Yeah.
But initially with Sea of Thieves, there's a lot of kind of tone and things, just sort of almost like music's just sort of blowing on the wind. So I get, and with that, I don't have it here. I have a thing called a nickel harper, which is kind of like it's kind of like a hurdy-gurdy. It's still got these sort of the keys to play the notes, but you play.
That is a spelling.
Nickel harper.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to put that in chat just
so
so
kind of
see how it's spelled.
So I did a load of sort of bits of music with that, and then I cut them up, and I think there must have been 30 or 40 sort of little phrases, and then cut those up and put those in and just get the Wise, which is the engine we use.
I was curious about that because
so we use that. So that would then randomly trigger these stings and play them, and it kind of just gave you a nice kind of tone that this kind of music was in the universe. And I really like that because it's instead of writing a 3-minute piece of music that starts here and ends there and then just loops around, it's kind of just, it picks out bits randomly between. You can sort of say, well, play a sting every 30 to 50 seconds, and the software will just go off and do its own thing. And that's kind of that thing of like the music having a life after the composer, because it's the engine is just deciding what to do and when to play it. I really like that. So you have these pockets of music within the game, and when the player happens upon them, then various sort of things will trigger and play.
Apologies, I'm getting messages in the society. So could you just repeat that last thing you said?
What's that on the WYs?
No, the that's not important. I'll move on. Have you got a particular kind of favorite moment you've had from your time working at Rare, like that one track or that one kind of song or where you've programmed something in the game? It's just,
there's kind of a few, really. I suppose, I don't know. Yeah, there's things that happen in Conk. I really like. I was really pleased with the sort of main theme to Conk.
The overworld kind of that one. Yeah. That's what I had stuck in my head before this.
I was really pleased with that. And then things I suppose, like in Sea of Thieves, I wrote a piece of music called Becalmed. And my sort of sole purpose for writing that piece of music was I got the hurdy-gurdy. We said, right, we're going to get a hurdy because it'll be piratey and it'll sound, and all this. It arrived and I got it out of the box and cranked the crank and went, this sounds horrendous. We spent all this money on this instrument and it sounds really horrible. I don't know what we're going to do with it. Anyway, played it for a while, and kind of bonded with that. But the whole sort of reason for Becalmed was me trying to make the hurdy sound like something pleasant to listen to. And I wrote that tune, and I remember thinking, I'm not sure if the team's going to like this. I'm not sure if they're going to go, it's a bit sort of sentimental, isn't it? It's not very it's not very piratey, but they all loved it.
It certainly earned its place.
And then people, but then the game comes out and people play it, and then it's sort of become a fan favorite. And it's just one of those things you don't realize when you're writing something the sort of impact it will have. It becomes, when you kind of have that gut feeling that, I really, really like this piece of music, but I'm just not sure the team are going to go for it. But yeah.
if you're for the students in here, if you're interested in the hurdy-gurdy, Elcom I think have two, and one of them's broken and one of them works. But you know, there's one available to take out of facilities and play if you're interested in it. They're quite kind of unusual in a sense. Yeah, got one over there. It's the hurdy.
The hurdy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's not. I don't think it's an instrument I'd choose to play, but
I've seen some people do kind of rock band music with hurdy-gurdy
Yeah.
online before. It's
just the camera a bit, shouldn't I? See that? See that?
Yep.
There you go. That's a hurdy-gurdy. So it's I think these are called tangents, I think. Chromatic. You have like your melody strings here. You have your drone strings here. This has quite a few different bits on it. This is a guy called Neil Brook in Lancashire who makes them. And then the what's called the dog. Let me just take that, which I hardly use because it's pretty horrible.
Piracy though.
How do I get that to play? How do you play the dog? Yeah, so it's kind of got this buzz.
I think Zoom is mistaking it for background noise.
Oh, is it? Is it not going to work?
No, it's never going to work.
Can I set that so it doesn't?
That's probably like a.
Yeah, Teams does the same thing, and I'll play something to somebody on Teams. I go, "Can you hear me?" They go, "No, can't hear a thing." I go, noise suppression. Is there a way to turn that off?
It'll be in your private settings, but I think you have to change. Actually, no, it might be in audio settings.
Preferences, audio. Here we go.
Yep, suppress background noise. There we go. It's on auto by default.
So can I turn it off? Original sound for musicians.
Yes, that's the one you want.
Can you hear
that? Hang on. No, I don't think we can still.
See, optimized audio. High fidelity music mode.
No.
Hello, does that work?
You put it the suppressed background noise onto low, that might, and also maybe turn off automatically adjust microphone volume.
Oh, okay.
I think those two. There we go. Yeah.
Yeah, the joys of the it was worth the wait, wasn't it? Yeah, so this is I hardly use this string because it's, as you can tell, it's not a great sound.
No.
You have to kind of get it to buzz. It's the buzzing string. Anyway.
Yeah.
I hardly use that because it's horrible. There's a drone string down here. So this one here. Sorry, so this crank turns this wheel here. So this is the bow, really. Yeah. So there's no dynamics with a hurdy. That's it.
You've got on or off.
You can play a bit slower, but it'll just
yeah.
And then you've got your melody strings here. So there you go. That's kind of a rundown of the hurdy.
Obviously, you didn't play this before Sea of Thieves. There's a little bit of a.
No.
Yeah.
No, I don't. I really don't know why anyone would want to play them.
How many years have you been playing it for now? It's about.
Was it? Is it going for 5 years? Maybe.
Yeah.
Prior to that, just in development. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's okay. No, I've learned to sort of bond with it, I suppose. I do like it. It's nice. It's nice if you get the hurdy on one side, the nickel harper on another, and then something like I use a Spitfire viola, solo viola. So that's kind of like holding the intonation, and then these two are kind of doing that. But you get the three of them together. You get you get this sort of really nice piratey but pleasant sound. But I do lots of stuff with the Hurdy in Pro Tools where I'll kind of fade in and out so I can try and shape some sort of dynamics into it and things like that. And things like the drone string is, you're kind of stuck with the drone. So I use Melodyne to change I sort of rhythmically kind of play the drone like that, where I want the different notes to be, and then I'll shift them in Melodyne to give me a bass line, because otherwise you're sort of a little bit limited melodically if you just
it's not really a bass instrument in the ensemble.
Yeah, and it kind of sounds medieval and not really piratey. So yeah, so yeah.
I was going to ask something. It's not the only instrument you've looked at for CFEs. You've got the concertina, and something I think is really cool is the cowribs.
The cowribs are at Rare at the moment.
Yeah, if you'd like to explain kind of what those are to those.
The cowribs. So the cowribs are like rhythm. They're called rhythm bones. So you get two. Can I kind of emulate it with something? I wonder.
I suppose playing the spoons is a close.
Kind of like the spoons. Yeah, you kind of get you hold one sort of fixed on your hand, and then this one you have one here. So you hold one there, and you hold it with that finger to hold it in place, and then you have one here that's kind of a little bit looser, and you kind of get a triplet thing. So you kind of get. So I've got various pairs of them, but the best ones I've got are the ones I made. And I went down to my local butcher's and said, "Do you have any cow ribs?" And he said, "Are you making spare ribs?" I said, "No, I'm going to make some rhythm bones." And he was like, "What? Pardon?" So I took my iPad just so I could show him like a Wikipedia page of rhythm bones, and he went, "Oh yeah, you want the flat ribs? Yeah, come back on Friday and I'll have a bag of them for you." So I went back, and there was these kind of long cow ribs that I then brought home, boiled up, and just got them down to bone, and then just kind of shaped them to what I thought should be the right kind of length, and then sanded them off, and then proceeded to try and learn how to play them, to try and get that kind of triplet effect. So I remember sitting in the studio at Rare, and with a pair of these on, just because the click was really kind of getting to my ears after a while. And about 2 or 3 days to kind of get that sort of sound.
It's not an easy skill.
Yeah, so that's interestingly, that's the sort of Sea of Thieves theme is the cow rib, because I was sort of sat in between trying to learn how to play them. I was just sort of rocking them like that, and it made this sort of interesting sort of sound, and I started doing a rhythm like, and I'm just rocking these ribs, and that's how I recorded a load of, I think I did about 5 or 8 sort of takes in Pro Tools, and just layered them together and sort of split them.
Do you
that was the sort of first thing I did in the theme.
When you started off, you were working in Cubase. Do you kind of find that you have to, use a lot of the different kind of doors there are out there? Or is it just kind of I've got my thing that I like and I continue on with it?
Yeah, we don't sort of force anybody to work in any door. If they've got some people, Chloe is working in Reaper. I'm on Pro Tools now. I keep sort of thinking about going to Logic, but I'm fine with Pro Tools. I think it's a red hammer or a yellow hammer, really. It's they all kind of do the same thing,
Time dealing with the quirks is the same amount of time it would take to learn the new one, sort of thing.
Yeah, I know when I made the switch from Cubase, because I was on Cubase, and then because N64 was all MIDI stuff, so Cubase was fine for all that. And then when we started to sort of do real audio, I think Pro Tools Avid did this thing called Pro Tools 001, I think. And it was like an 8-track version of Pro Tools. So it wasn't, because we didn't have loads of memory for audio. So it was a bit hard to sort of justify buying a massive DAW, because we were still sort of working on cartridge and stuff. So I got Pro Tools, like this sort of cheaper version, I suppose, which I used to run with Cubase on the PC, Pro Tools on a Mac, and I had them time coded together. So I would then run my audio on Pro Tools, run the MIDI from Cubase, and then when the MIDI kind of got good enough on Pro Tools, I just thought I'm going to switch to that. So there's some stuff that I suppose Cubase was pretty good for on MIDI, but I think I had it sort of, Pro Tools had enough for what I wanted to do, so I switched. Then I've sort of been on that ever since. But I think it's just whatever works for you, really. I think you can get a bit caught up in the whole sort of DAW wars thing,
Yeah.
And then often the people who are kind of on the forums going, "No, it's rubbish, and this is way better than that," and all that sort of stuff. It's like, well, are you writing any music, or are you just on the forums bitching about? You know what I mean? It's like,
yeah,
often,
you get kind of too worked
sort of,
up in it, the brand loyalty. Yeah.
Yeah, and you sort of often you'll follow those they sound like they know what they're talking about. I wonder what their music's like. It's like, oh right, okay. Spend a bit more time. Guys, the hard part for me is coming up with the music.
I was
not the DAW. The DAW isn't the problem. It's me. That's the problem.
I was gonna a question from someone else in our society who emailed is it asking about kind of how you start the process. Do you kind of write a tune, go, oh that's nice, maybe we can put it in this, or does somebody come up to you and say we need this?
It's generally we need this, or I mean some of it's kind of you're just kind of exploring and trying to find your sort of sound palette, I suppose. So for Sea of Thieves, before there was kind of there's no at some point there's I don't know if you've seen the prototype, but it's like little tic tac men and things like that.
Yeah, then
yeah. So at that point, you're just trying to kind of get your head around what the sort of signature sound is of the game, or trying to create that. So that early on was kind of Joe Neat, the exec producer, said, what would a pirate band sound like? That's kind of stuck with me. I thought, what would a pirate band sound like? It's like, well, it would be kind of beaten up instruments, and pirates who are kind of just managing to get around on them, which is handy because I'm not a hurdy-gurdy player, but so do you know what I mean? It's kind of you can just get around a tune on them and things like that. And there's things like the concertinas where when we went to buy that, it was Hobgoblin in Birmingham. It's like a folk. I don't know if you heard.
There's one in Leeds.
Yeah, they're all over the country. Yeah. Sort of folk store. So that we went there, and they had a cabinet full of concertinas, and we just kept. None of us played. We just kept getting one out and playing a few notes. Oh, it's okay. It sounds a bit nice. Sounds a bit bright. And then there was this one here at the back of the cabinet, which is completely. It's got a big hole.
Nice and piracy.
But it's got a lot of creak and
yeah.
If you can hear that, it's kind of some of the reeds are kind of letting air and stuff, and it kind of had this sound, and we all went, "That's the one, that's perfect." And the guy in the shop was like, "Okay."
Yeah.
So I suppose it's that for Sea of Thieves, it kind of started like that, and then it's trying to the whole kind of thing of we don't want to infer an emotion the player's not having. It was like, well, how are we going to write music for this game if so that's kind of started with tone for that.
Were the shanties the shanties were really early on, not necessarily finished, but the idea for people can meet up and play music together, that was really early on.
Yes. Yeah. So writing a shanty, I generally, for most stuff, I generally sort of load up a piano sound and noodle about until I come up with a melody and some chords, and I go, that's kind of. I mean, I suppose I still like to hear a theme and a melody. I'd like to hear a sort of an earworm, I suppose. I know a lot of composers are kind of maybe against themes and stuff, and it's more about.
In the film world, you don't want to distract too much, which is why it's I'd say discouraged rather than but in the video game world, you want the earworms because they've got to listen to it for so long. It's got to be something they can enjoy. I suppose
maybe it comes from I don't know, maybe it comes from just having the early days of having no memory whatsoever. So the only thing you had was a melody. I don't know. But I still like to, I listen to people like John Williams and those incredible melodies, and I still like to hear a nice theme.
Mm.
I think if you kind of get that for Sea of Thieves, if we have like a season coming up and it's going to be this kind of story, then coming up with a theme for that, you kind of done half your work. If you get something that fits, you can sort of reuse that and do refrains of that melody and different instruments and things like that. So that works for me. It seems to work for that game.
Mm.
But generally, starting off writing anything, it's usually a piano and noodling till something
comes up. Mm.
falls in your lap. You go, oh, that's all right.
Sorry, I've got to read my list. Someone asked if is there because obviously you've been essentially making pirate music for 5 years now. Do you find it kind of, in some ways, oh, I'm a bit tired of pirate music, or I'd love to do this, or now, or you're stuck in pirate music and now you can't think in the non-piratey sort of sense?
No, I'm doing other stuff, but
yeah.
No, I still love it. I still love it. Still really do enjoy it. And there's kind of moments where there's it's not there's different kind of textures and melodies and stories and things where it's forever changing. But
one of the things about Sea of Thieves brings me to see it when you started Sea of Thieves. I don't think it was planned to be live service. I don't think the term live service existed back when it was.
It was planned to be.
Okay.
But yeah, it was.
Okay, that's fine then. I was going to ask if.
I suppose it's the whole sort of game as a service thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was sort of fairly new, I suppose.
Mm.
And sort of bringing out this content every month.
I was curious how that kind of impacted the workflow, because obviously before it's right, we get everything done, we put it in a package once a year, and then we can, there's time to kind of dwindle on things, and but obviously if you've got to keep producing things, it might. I wonder how that kind of changes the process.
Oh, it's busy for sure.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think we kind of got into we released sort of like version 1, I suppose, and then we just kind of got into that momentum of, right, okay, this is coming up next. Well, we planned ahead quite a way, so we know what's coming up for the best part of a year. And you just sort of work through, okay, we need to jump on this now and do this season's coming up, and this is what's going to involve. Sometimes you have reuse of music that you can make. That's fine because it takes place in that area of the Sea of Thieves,
like a character theme or something along those lines. Yeah.
But generally, we will have to sort of create some new bits and bobs, and maybe some new themes and things, or characters, or whatever. So yeah, I don't know. It's just it's constant and fun. Really, it gets busy and stressful at times, but it's luckily Chloe's started now as well. She's been there at Rare for a few years, so she started as an intern.
Yeah. I think I saw her in the background one of the videos. Went, oh, I recognise that face.
Yeah, so she's taking on quite a lot of the composing now as well. So that's a massive help as well. So it's less stressful. Yeah.
I was gonna wait until the hour to open up the floor to questions, but I'm I'm in a weird position where I went, I don't know what to ask. I'll read loads of interviews, and now I have all the answers to a lot of their questions, so I forget to ask them. I assume everyone can message and chat, and I've not got a Zoom setting turned on, but if you want to ask a question, you can start posting them in there. Oh, got someone else joining. A few moments. I'll try and read another thing quickly. So obviously you're kind of not limited in just doing trailer music or doing game music. There's kind of that nice middle ground, I suppose. Do you find you have maybe a preference for one than the other? or is it just kind of I'm enjoying what I'm doing all the way
I
through?
think it's nice to have a mix of it all because I do enjoy doing a trailer. I've not done Chloe's done the past few, and I've just done one this past week,
Mm.
and it's been really fun to just jump onto like it is nice to sort of do a this is a linear, a film kind of.
Oh, here comes the questions.
Um, so that's fun, but the interactive stuff is always, I suppose, my pet hate with games is that kind of thing. You land on a level, this piece of music starts, and it's that repetition.
Mm. And you got
We've made a sort of concerted effort with Sea of Thieves not to. We've always tried to make the music interact and do stuff.
I think a fort's a good example of that, where you've got that kind of, depending on which wave you're on, it adapts as things are happening.
Yeah,
Yeah. But it's not
And-
it's not start end, it's
no,
start.
it kind of. I mean, the forts is kind of like you've got an approach piece of music, and then when you get on the fort, you've got like I suppose the sort of exposition where it's kind of a theme, and then it kind of it drops into a simmer. And there's a load of, I recorded a lot of flumpet for that trumpet, for that. And those, I think I must have recorded about, well, I recorded a lot of stuff, but then I took about maybe 40 phrases. So they randomly trigger, sort of say in wise, trigger these every bar or between every bar or every 6 bars or something like that. We can set that up to do that. So that's that thing of it's kind of it goes into like a simmer, but it's got these melodies that play over the top that randomly trigger, so you're not getting the same one. And then the fort captain will turn up, so then you go into the this kind of Spanish version of the Sea of Thieves theme. So that's kind of a lot of stuff seems to work like that.
I'm going to read off some of the questions in the chat because they won't be on the recording. So what do you find most compelling to start composing based off, i.e. concept art, a vertical slice of the game, or actually sitting there and playing it with people, sort of things?
Oh, that's a hard one. It's because it's all of those things, really. All those things, because sometimes that initial exploration on a game is always brilliant. It's that kind of thing of where you're trying to find your sound palette and you can go off and experiment with lots of different stuff, and so that's really enjoyable. That whole moment of getting the Sea of Thieves, getting the herdie going, I'm not sure I don't know what I'm going to do with this, and then kind of learning to love it and getting it to actually sound nice and putting it in a nice reverb, and it still sounds nice and piratey, but it kind of works. But then equally, some of the gameplay stuff that is coming up, so you've got a definite plan of, well, it's this and this, and you get excited about writing the music for that. The Force is a good example of that.
Yeah,
it was like, what we're going to do with this, and landing on that kind of thing of playing the flumpet on it.
That's one of the
quite a shift for Sea of Thieves in terms of sound palette wise, but it kind of worked.
That's one of the things that is quite nice about the kind of variety that Sea of Thieves has, is you can have those sort of more tailored moments, but also those word on the wind, as you were saying earlier.
Yeah. It's I like the fact that I love that thing of the randomness of that thing I said before of the music having a life beyond the composer, because you sort of write these bits and you break them out, and then you let the software kind of trigger them. But also, it's the player who's kind of almost the arranger of the music. Because they could go, well, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go over here and do this instead, or I'm going to get the banjo out and play that, and it all has to react to that. I'm going to get drunk and play the banjo, so that has to play a drunk version of the shanty.
One of the things I love doing is when I'm playing Sea of Thieves with people is just choosing an instrument to get a solo moment in one of the shanties, and then have everyone drop out very suddenly, and you get these sudden, it's that live composition thing of it. This isn't what's written on a score, but the fact that it's an option is so really nice. Just suddenly have somebody whistling on top. It's quite. I'm always impressed by the shanty system of just how easy it is to use, but also obviously how long it would have taken, because there's essentially 50 different versions of
well, you've got a lead part, a backing part, you've got a drunken part, you've got a underwater part
Mm,
as well.
that's one of the ones that gets forgotten.
John Vincent, who's the audio director at Rare, he played a big part in that because he wrote the really, I mean, a real sort of string to our bow is that he writes code. So
that's one of the luxuries of working at in somewhere where you can walk down the hall, I suppose.
He's 2 doors down from me, and we're just
knock. Can you make me a shanty system, please?
Yeah, and he got all that to work, and he got that all to work in the prototype, and that whole thing of it just staying in sync over the network and all that sort of stuff, and the whole thing of I played first, I get the melody, you play second, you get the backing.
Something I'm quite curious about is there's obviously some of the shanties that are original. There's also shanties that are arrangements of fairly well-known classical pieces. What was the kind of like thought process selection of that? Was it just we need that kind of 1812 moment, or was it?
I think we just thought it'd be fun to. I don't know. We just thought it'd be funny. Kind of, because obviously you got a ship with cannons and people are firing cannons. Like, well, what?
You need 1812.
Well, if you could play the 1812 while your friends firing a load of cannons, it's going to be quite a good moment. I suppose it's kind of this sandbox of ingredients where the players can go, all right, I'm going to use that. I mean, for a long time we had Happy Birthday, and that was in dev wise that was always used to just troll people when they made a mistake. So that was like a slow cap. It was kind of it was used like that. But it's that sort of thing where those you give the tools to the players and then they just decide how they're going to use them. But like what's the can, I suppose. That was. I think I just thought, oh, would it be funny if everyone gets drunk, shoots, starts shooting it and having sword fights, and somebody starts making can quite the music.
Yeah.
But they take a long time to put together, those shanties do.
Going back to the questions in chat. Right. What gave the idea to reuse Who Shall Not Be Returning for the Sirens as well as Flameheart? Or was it something that a different department wanted?
The melody, so it was kind of like, it's a slight difference on Flameheart. It's just is it like a harmonic minor, I think, on the scale. I think it's slightly different for him, but it's, if you remember, I don't know if you remember, we did like early before the game was released, we did a sort of a what did we call it? It was like it was the We Shall Sail Together tune with a kind of camera moving through a scene. Don't you remember
that? I think that was long before I bought it.
The trailer.
Was it E3? I think I saw one of those, but I don't.
It's kind of like a camera that moves from everything's still in the scene, but the camera moves through and it kind of goes below deck, above deck, underwater.
Yeah, I think I remember.
And there's a moment in that trailer where Flameheart stood there and that counterpoint melody comes in. Da, 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 da. So that was, we did that in the trailer. So therefore, it's kind of related to, it's kind of the opposite of it's the opposite of We Shall Sail Together. It's kind of the good of the So it was like, why don't we use that melody for him? Because he's on, it's a counterpoint that plays at that point in that trailer when he's on screen.
So
that was a thinking.
Yeah. So kind of just happened.
Yeah. His melody.
Adam asks, with special crossovers such as Pirate's Life, do you find it to be an extra challenge writing music that's going to be immediately compared to Hans Zimmer's pirate music?
Yes. So one of the first sort of, when I was playing in a rock band and I went to see Rain Man at the cinema, and I was thinking, the music to this this film is, I really, really like the music. I want to do it. It's like one of the first times I sort of stood at the end of the film and gone, all right, Hans Zimmer, I'll have to check him out. And I sort of loved everything he's done ever since then. So yeah, it was pressure to say the least.
Yeah, classic imposter syndrome that we're all familiar with.
Yeah, and Klaus Badelt, isn't it?
I I don't recall if you were allowed to use any of his themes or not, because I never finished the Pirate Life. But were you allowed to use elements of his music, because it had to be completely original?
We got a couple, but then I suppose. But I tended to try and write in Pirates of the Caribbean kind of style.
Okay. What would be the best way to get started in the video game composition world? That's a doozy of a question.
I think now it's very different from when I'd started in it. I mean, I suppose I was trying to do the TV stuff, and that was pretty saturated. So I saw an opportunity. Games were starting to sound kind of like music. I thought, I mean, I should try. Do you know what I mean? It was. I don't know, real music. Chiptune music is fantastic, but there was games like what was it, The Seventh Guest, I think, and I was like, oh, that's actually a real performance going on. And so I think I thought I'm going to try and approach that, because I think they're going to require music that as that gets more sort of sophisticated. It's going to require a lot of musicians and composers to get involved with it. So I think I got in fairly early with that, but I think now there's an awful lot of game jams. Is a good way to do it.
Kind of meeting people more so at the moment.
People and doing that sort of stuff, and stuff. People need music. I mean, a lot of indie titles out there. They're all going. I think that's a good way to start.
I'll chip in on this quickly, because I'm doing some game music for an independent person. The two best kind of advices you can get is learn Fmod and Wise, because they're not going to. Usually, if you're going for someone independent, they're not going to know. And then also, just kind of asking, to be honest, do you have a composer for this, on something you see on Twitter? But obviously money comes into that and things, but there's lots of ways in. I mean,
I would say try and, if you, I mean, people go, don't do it for like exposure, or that, try and get something. If there's no kind of budget for it, if have some kind of agreement to say, well, if you make money from it, there's something on the back end for you. If they can't put anything up front, because there's still. I'm very good at not taking my own advice, by the way. And
you've been a company man for.
I did lots of stuff for free. So prior to getting Rare, I did lots of stuff where it'd be great. We'll get fantastic exposure. And there's people still asked after I was at Rare to do stuff for free. I don't know what it is about creatives, but people just seem to think, well, you can do it for nothing, can't you? So always try and get paid for it. Somehow.
Is there a plan to add more variation with them in the music that plays during the sea battles, both PvP and PvE? I'll assume he's asking, like, is there a plan to add future variations to pre-existing scenarios?
Yeah, I can't really talk about stuff that that's not out there yet. So.
Okay, that's perfectly fair. How did you design each separate intro for On the Warpath, since there are so many different instances where it takes place within the game?
I think that started out as a trailer, as the trailer music, I think, and then it kind of, I suppose that goes back to what I was saying about, if you've got a theme, you can generally sort of, it's 50% of the work, in terms of, like, you've then got something that you can use elsewhere. So if you write something that people like, certainly on the team, they'll go, can we use that bit of music, and can we have a variation on that? So it's but I suppose it started as a trailer. It first appeared on the trailer, and then we got it in the game, and various sort of bits.
One of another benefit of kind of working the department, you have those, I'm just going to do you ever find that you kind of walk into each other's office or have the meeting, just kind of listen to what you've got and go, oh, can I borrow that bit there for my little thing over here.
Kind of, yeah, a little bit, but I suppose there's a whole sort of stuff about around the lore and stuff. So you kind of can't really use that because that's related to this character or this sort of story. But
Yeah.
there's a lot of stuff that kind of happens. I mean, it's weird because I'm because working from home for the past couple of years. It's kind of when we're on site, there's a lot of kind of stuff. Just as you're passing in the corridor.
Yeah, the water cooler moment.
If I hadn't have passed you, we would, this wouldn't have even happened. But I suppose it's sort of like those happy accidents that happen around that sort of stuff. But generally, we'll get a request come in from design, and then we'll talk amongst ourselves about or with design about how we should approach it. Does that answer the question? Kind of.
I think we kind of moved on from the question. I'll say it again. How did you design each separate intro for On the Warpath, since there are so many different instances where it takes place in the game?
That's the one we just did, isn't it?
Yeah. I felt like I answered a different question.
So it started. So that one started out as a trailer, and then it's kind of like, can we use that? We can use it here, and I don't know. It's just you just kind of do a different take of it and arrange it for different instruments and things like that. It's the kind of chords and the melody are there.
Do you tend to listen to other pieces of music when composing for inspiration, or do you prefer to kind of lock yourself in the room and hide the world away?
It's a bit of both, really. Certainly, in-game stuff, I tend to just sort of play around with stuff. Because, I mean, so if I'm writing a theme, it tends to be sort of piano. Sometimes you do just write sort of stuff that's kind of more ambient. So that's maybe a case of just loading up sort of different sounds and articulations on the Spitfire library or some of the other sort of synths, or getting something up on them. I'm not using a lot of this Moog on CDs, but I do use a bit of synth stuff on there. Videos and trailers, the video team will tend to temp music in on that. So, which is always, they sort of go, do you like it? I said, well, providing you don't want it to sound like that. That's fine. But I said it is a good sort of emotional steer for me to go, okay, I see what they're after here, so we can sort of justify that. But you don't, as long as you're not expecting me to copy it, because we're going to get to lawsuit territory. But I do find that helpful. I do find that kind of like, because the video guys do have a pretty good ear for music and stuff, so they don't do daft stuff. I'm
not going to suddenly ask.
They don't put something on the completely appropriate. They are pretty much ballpark. So it's kind of good just to get that. Okay, I see what they're after here. So it's a mixture, really. Sometimes for those kind of things, it's kind of helpful to listen to something.
When you were writing the shanties, did you kind of listen to some various traditional shanty songs, or was it kind of?
I did, and that I've kind of decided. Went through like traditional shanties. That's why we kind of wrote our own, because except for the sort of the classical pieces, sort of listen to shanties. Google blah blah blah. All right, okay. So all these are kind of shanties are kind of work songs. That's what they were intended for. So it's kind of just to pass the time on the ship, and it all felt a little bit.
To help pull with riggings and things. So
kind of sort of folk groupy almost. I mean, and it's kind of. I didn't want the shanties to sound like. I wanted it to sound sort of a bit jaunty and a bit piratey, and the pirates are all rough around the edges, and they've maybe had a bit too much to drink, and it's all a bit kind of like that. Whereas a lot of the sort of traditional shanties are very. You can almost picture like the folk group turned out in their Aran sweaters going down the pub to do a set of traditional shanties, and it just felt a little bit dry to me. I mean, having said that, we did. I suppose We Shall Sail is Drunken Sailor, but we kind of changed it around and put it in 3/4 and stuff, and tried to play around with it. but yeah, it was kind of let's just kind of make them quirky. And it's that thing of what would a pirate orchestra sound like, or what would a pirate's playing instrument sound like? Well, they sound like this. Me trying to just figure this thing out and just about getting a tune out of it.
Now, I think this is a question you can't answer, but I'd love to know if it's happening. Do you see yourself adding any other shanty instruments, for example, a flumpet or something similar that's, you know, just not strings or?
No, say never.
Yeah, no, say never.
Um,
Oh, that's a good question. So I'm going to skip ahead, Lewis, just because. How do you create the shanties for when pirates are drunk?
right, this is quite interesting. So originally, I just thought I'll try and replay them, but play them with bum notes and stuff. And it was kind of it was all right. It kind of sounded a little bit avant-garde. It just sounded didn't really sound drunk. And then because I like say in the I record the melody line on one track, and then with the hurdy can't play chords at all. But when you hear it, it's playing chords and it's changing chords. But so I record each sort of. I'd normally play the chord part out, then I'd split it off into its own tracks, and I would play those on the hurdy, the lines. If you see what I'm saying, and then do the so. I thought I'm going to use I used a Melodyne Autotune, ironically. So I put the parts through Melodyne and then just started to sour up, put the odd bum note in, but also started to just sour them a bit and put them really out of tune. And that was immediately we found that really hilarious and funny. And we just thought that's the way to go with it. So it's actually, ironically enough, it was Melodyne and Autotuner that we used to make parts play out of tune. Yeah.
A little scent adjustment there, and then yeah,
it's just and it was like, oh yeah, that's the way to go. And the one we struggled with, the only one we don't do it with is the drum part, because the putting the whistle through Melodyne and changing it it sounded odd. It just sounded it sounded a bit kind of weird and not really drunk. So the drunk part is just somebody trying to whistle. I said, well, what if it was just somebody who was plastered and couldn't actually form a note, so we just go. So it's kind of like. So those are all John Vincent, the drunken whistles. The in tune whistle is a guy called John McMurtry, who's the head video guy, who's also he sang on the Captains of Adventure trailer. I don't know if you.
Yeah, no, I recognise I know who you're on about. Yeah,
so he's got a really nice whistle, so he does the in tune. Whistle, and then John Vincent, the audio director, does the drum.
Oh, it's not a good look for him, is it?
But again, that was one of those things. It's like, this is how we're going to get this right, and we kind of just kept the drum as it was and get the odd kind of miss hit. But yeah.
Someone's asked, do you ever immortalize crews through music? Are any pieces written specifically? Oh, there's quite a few questions in that one. Do you ever immortalize crews through the music? I know there's Glitterbeard, who was immortalized through a secret. Yeah. I'm not sure.
Yeah, there's the odd thing. Yeah.
Occasionally.
Yeah, sort of Easter eggy type stuff.
Any of the pieces written specifically from experience of the development team? For example, you had a Happy Birthday as a troll song. Maybe you wrote something else to kind of take its place.
So was it from just experience?
Something that something happened in the dev team. You went, oh, that would have been great if it had a musical moment. I assume that's what it's asking. Could you clarify that for me, please, Lewis?
I'm trying to think. I'm sure there is, but I'm just trying
to. I have to come back to that one.
Yeah.
So Lewis asks, are you constantly composing for CFEs? So I presume that. Do you have like moments of lots of work and then moments of I need to kind of take a break?
It's generally lots of work. And you're going, I need to take a break while having lots of work to do. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty good. It's pretty good in terms of like work-life balance.
Mm,
So there's always something, we see these, there's always something to write. There's
mm,
always something that we need to, create music for.
mm. I know from other interviews, you're quite prone to the work whilst you're riding your bike, kind of,
Yes.
just to take little walks, things like that.
I think, I mean, that's the exercise thing is something I wish I'd sort of discovered sooner.
Mm,
Um, I just think I think it's so important. I think it's so important to sort of just get away from this and this and the door and just go for a walk or I think it does an awful lot for your mental health in terms of just having a break instead of just burning out on a piece of music.
sit there staring at it. I go, oh, I
Yeah,
don't know, I've got a deadline.
yeah, and it starts to sort of spiral and it can I think I wish I'd sort of I think the thing with me and fitness is I've just never liked it, so and I just sort of discovered cycling in terms of I started mountain biking and then a friend said I'm going to do Land's End John O'Groats, so I said, oh, I quite fancy that, so I went and switched to road biking and did that. And I just love cycling, and I think it's just a case of I think it's so important to sort of do some fitness because I think it does really those endorphins get going and it just makes you feel more energized and sort of more positive about when you sit down at the to sort of create. I think you feel a bit more inspired by doing it. But so I think you find something that you enjoy doing, and that's because if you enjoy doing it fitness wise, this is I think you will you're more likely to keep it up. I think it's so important.
Lewis asks, are there any constraints you find to writing the video game music, especially with Sea of Thieves?
No, not really. I mean, it used to be. It used to be memory. It always used to be that, and the sample rate was we can't. You had to sort of knock the sample rate down on your sounds and things, so they kind of were dull and didn't sound very good. But now it doesn't feel. It feels like we can do anything we want to do, really.
As long as budget allows.
Budget, yeah. We could go and record an orchestra if we have done it in the past and things like that. We haven't done it with Sea of Thieves just because it'd just be too hard to sort of. It's not one of those games where you record the score and then release it and that's it. It's a constant thing. So we just
also is an orchestra very piratey.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing.
Yeah,
I do lean into the orchestra a bit when we want those kind of bigger moments, those sort of more story-driven moments. We kind of try and get that kind of big epic sound. But it just wouldn't. It's just not practical because of our sort of release cycle. We couldn't keep sort of going down to Abbey Road. It wouldn't run out of time basically. So it doesn't feel like now there's any there are limits. There's always limits to the hardware, but it doesn't feel like there is. We've pretty much been able to sort of implement what's been imagined.
I can't remember which questions I asked you. Lewis asked, do you play the game much yourself? And does sitting there playing it affect your composition process?
I do. I tend to. My kids are often on. Well, certainly my youngest has moved to PC, the Master Race. Doesn't play as much. He play it on his PC, whereas my eldest boy still plays on the Xbox, and he plays Sea of Thieves a lot. So I tend to sort of sit with him when he's playing it and seeing how it's. I mean, we tend to have play tests, rare side, and go through everything and check everything's working all right. But yeah, you get moments where you go, oh, why? That'd be quite nice. I'm trying to think. There's one recently. There's one I wrote a piece of music for the front end, and James, our community guy, said, "Is that piece of music? Is that once we change season? Is that going to go?" I said, "Yeah, it probably is." He said, "Oh, it's a shame because really like it. I think we've called it a starter sail by on the digital release. And he said, I can just imagine sitting and watching a sunset and hearing that piece of music. So we actually spoke to John about it, spoke to Mike Chapman, the design director, and then he said, yeah, that's a brilliant idea. We should do that. So spoke to John Vincent and said, is there a way we can trigger this somehow if certain sort of parameters are met? And he said, yeah, okay. So if we say at this time of day, if you're in an outdoor area and you're seated, then this piece of music will play. So that's one of those things that's come around from somebody else making the suggestion. We're going, yeah, that's a really good idea. Let's implement that. The other one was I don't know if you know, there's the Shrouded Ghost. Have you ever heard of that? The sort of rare megalodon.
Yeah, I listened to it, but it was about 2 weeks ago, and I don't remember how it goes.
So it was a campaign, the Shrouded Ghost, where you
yeah.
You've just seen the Shrouded Ghost doesn't exist. It does.
Yeah.
So and then that campaign was over, but the Shrouded Ghost is still there, believe it or not. So
so as you can't see it, chat,
I can just.
He's killed it himself, and I still don't believe it's dead.
I know when we released that piece of music, somebody put out, this piece of music doesn't exist or something like that. I can't hear anything. That was it. Anyway, that piece of music will now. I said to John, instead of just playing the sort of normal Meg music, can we now trigger this if people encounter? So there you go. If you hear that bit of music, then you know it's the Shrouded Ghost.
How do you compose for each area of the game? Do you have like a specific instrumentation you'll keep for the underwater areas, or you'll only use this instrument in the kind of hot climates?
Yeah. So I suppose initially we started out with 3 areas, and I can't remember what we ended up naming them, but we had like the wilds, the Sea of Plenty, the Sea of something else. So
Dave, someone's written in chat.
We said, okay, this area, stick to these. Nickel Harper for this, the Sea of Plenty, I think it was. And we kind of went more because it was the Ancients, I think, was in the other area. So we kind of went more with flutes and stuff on that. So it's definite kind of, for those.
You can hear where you are, sort of things. Yeah.
Yeah. And then underwaters, things like a euphone. That's how long since I wrote that. I think I did the euphone, and I did some sort of. It could have been a bit of Nickel Harper as well on that, maybe just but in a lot of splosh and stuff, kind of reverb, and just rolled off the top end on it and things. So tend to sort of go, this is for this area. This is for this area.
I presume you do kind of similar things with themes as well. I mean, we've got leitmotifs for characters and all that.
And things like the shipwrecks are like whole tone and stuff like that.
All that I didn't notice that.
So and that's a good example of something playing, and then it randomly picks melodies that can play. Against that. And the things like Ferry of the Damned has that's kind of got the waterphone on it, and I think we were quite that kept sort of modulating. So I think we did like a handful of like melodies. So, and we would mark that out, saying if you're on this chord, you can pick from this part of melodies. If you're on this chord, you can pick from this part. And then that can go around. So that and we had to write a bit of special code for the Ferry of the Damned because it always started at the same point. And I said, do we have to start on that same chord each time? John had to do something special so that we could randomly start anywhere within that, and then it could go around the cycle from there. It's just that thing because obviously you die a lot, so
well, Try not to. No.
unless you're, yeah. But yeah, so it's that kind of thing of this is going to happen a lot, so we don't want to always start on this.
Obviously, in some of those firefights, you're constantly in and out, and you're just going to hear that same musical cue every single time.
It's
It just
stuff
gets
that kind of gets, yeah, and it gets fatiguing pretty quickly, that sort of stuff. So try to avoid things like that where let's start at a different point, and that's why it's got like you'll never hear the same melody. Each time it'll randomly pick from say 20.
How did you design the music for The Legend of the Veil? Did you use more themes relating to pirate legends, as it was a special voyage compared to voyages like taking out ghost fleets?
Legend of the Veil. I think Chloe did that one. Ballad of the Brinebeard.
Can we get a Ballad of the Brinebeard?
Legend of the Veil. Yeah, I think that was, I don't know, that was Chloe's.
You kind of take it in turns then, essentially, with, or is it people go, oh, I want to work on that project, so I'll put my name down?
We kind of just sort of go, do you want to take this, or shall I take it, or we just kind of just divvy it between us. And certainly the trailers, we've tried to sort of leapfrog it, so we're not constantly doing a trailer.
Yeah,
it's more enjoyable that way, I think, if you're not constantly on the hook for it. So
I'll ask about VSTs, because I know we'll eventually have some very some film and production students who really want to know what kind of, do you have like a particular favorite library you tend to use?
Yeah, Spitfire, really. I think I love their stuff. It just, the thing about it is, I think the Spitfire stuff is it just all sits nicely together, all the different libraries, because probably to do with the whole I suppose, because they record in that same space. So in the past, I've found that I've had to sort of really tussle with stuff to try and get it to sound nice, whereas the Spitfire stuff seems to just kind of sit in that space. You could use the Zimmer strings, and you could use like the Abbey Road horns. I mean, those are completely two different spaces, but they still kind of sit nicely together. So I use a lot of the Spitfire stuff. I tend to try and use that with the sort of real instruments and mix in.
Is there kind of a difficulty in kind of getting the two sounds to blend? Obviously, the Hurdy doesn't like blending as it is.
Yeah, I tend to just stick it in a load of splosh and it kind of go, it kind of sits all right. I suppose the most recent example is the Shrouded Ghost music, where the Hurdy makes an appearance in that with the orchestra. And it kind of worked. I wasn't going to use it at all. I was like, I'm going to try using it. And you're like, oh yeah, that sounds okay. What other stuff? There's a few sort of synths I use. Omnisphere, quite like that. I've got a Moog one. That's not a VST, but I've got a Moog one there.
Oh wow!
Which I'm sort of playing around with at the moment.
That looks expensive.
I've got a thing here. A harped. My room is a mess. Sorry.
That's all right. That's the reason my camera's where it is.
So there's this thing called a harpeggiator. This is really nice. Because I'm not a guitarist, but that's kind of because it's mapped out like a keyboard chromatically, so that's fairly easy to sort of mess around with and then stick that in through. I've started experimenting with pedals and things. But yeah, in terms of VSTs, it's pretty much Spitfire. There's a little bit of VSL on there. A little bit. They did the VSL Timps do the bend thing. If I was down, I don't think, unless I'm doing it wrong. I don't know. But I'm not discovered it.
In terms of like using Wise, do you tend to do a lot of the putting the stuff in there, or do you find that you tend to write the tunes and then someone else is the middleman for things? I
usually hand it to John or one of the other sound designers. So I tend to I'll talk through usually with John about, can we do this, can we do that, and we don't use the interactive music an awful lot in Wise. We tend to sort of put the music in the sound effects hierarchy, because it just gives a little bit more flexibility in terms of like play this, because it's just a sound. So it's play this, and you can play it every between 10 and 40 seconds, say, and you have like a, so it feels to me like you can just get a little bit more randomness to it.
Is it fairly difficult kind of picking which pieces of music should get these priorities? Is it, you know?
Yes.
Hard question. Yeah.
No, you're right. No, so it's things like yeah, because you could have a meg encounter, but then a skelly ship can pop up. So you want the music to that, but then you also want some of this sort of stuff. And then if you go underwater, you want to switch to that. So there is a hierarchy. It kind of gets a bit sort of head scratchy at times, but we try to sort of get a balance with it.
I know Overwatch did a game developers conference talk where they're just talking about how they had to go through and manually decide whose footsteps are louder in every instance, because obviously if somebody's big behind you, you need to know. It's kind of yeah. You used to do quite a bit of work in the sound. A lot of your credits on IMBD are for sound design rather than composition, which is I find quite interesting. Do you find, you know, it's benefited, say, your music performance, or do you kind of miss it in some regard?
I don't know. I didn't know about that. I'll have to go look at that. The sound design thing was always just purely from when I first started at Rare. It was like, we need you to do sound effects as well. Is that okay? And like, yeah, okay, yeah, that's fine. I used to enjoy doing it. It was nice, sort of, sometimes because it was one person on a game. Sometimes it was nice to sort of do a bit of sound design, just have a break from trying to write. And you could just do a bit of that sort of stuff. But I think it's now it's just too special. The last game I did sound design on was Conker's Bad Fur Day.
It's quite wild.
I think that was an awful lot of work. It kind of, because I think we got like, I think the cartridge was like 40 megabytes of audio, which is quite a lot. Consider how much we compressed it and stuff. I'm happy doing just the music now, because I think it's too specialized now. It's not something I could just go, I'm going to go do a bit of sound design, because that's a completely different discipline altogether. I think, you know, there's a lot of sort of subtlety and that you can get into the sound design now, and you can go into down such a rabbit hole with all of that stuff as you can with the music stuff.
That comes up probably mostly from just the memory. You've got the space to make these incredibly detailed sounds. So
yeah, and how all that will work within, and how the sort of trigger rate and all that sort of stuff, when you've got all of this stuff triggering at once, it's a completely its own discipline, as it is something like mixing as well. I think really, I enjoy composing now, because I think I've just got so much to learn still on that.
And the endless thing is always something to get better at.
Yeah, I think so. And
a lot of,
as the games get sort of more sophisticated as well, it's kind of just thinking of ways and how we're going to sort of approach that musically.
There's a lot of questions in chat asking who ate the coconut and banana sounds.
Oh, I think that was Guillaume. Guillaume Muller, we got one of our sound designers, I think. I'm pretty sure it was him.
Yeah, got a nice crunchy kind of apple sound. Do you find some of the sound effects are obviously going to be, I mean, maybe a good example of that would be the kind of sting when you hit a thing where you know, if you're not making a sound effect, but you're getting kind of these sounds from the sound department going, oh, how can I make sure those work with the music and things, like, you know.
Yeah, we sort of tend to sort of talk to each other and sort of go, this is where I am. I mean, they'll try and sort of stay away from sort of tonal sort of stuff.
Yeah,
might do the odd bit now and again, but if they do, they'll kind of give us a bit of a heads up on it, and this is what I'm thinking for this. So you try and sort of stay off each other's frequency range, I suppose.
Yeah. So you know, get that lovely tritone from the apple eating. Yeah. Is the music for the Chest of a Thousand Grogs its own special track? Is it just the drunk version of the shanty?
No, it's yes, because it's chopped into
Mm.
it's chopped into each. Yeah, this. I need to look at the. It's sliced into dun 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 dun. Dun. So it's chopped into those sections.
It's individual. No, it's kind of sort of like the sampling of old. Yeah.
Because the rate of the play is off the player and the stumbling. So it's the rate that it plays. It slows down as the movement slows down, and it speeds up as they sort of So that was quite tricky. Well, was it? I suppose it was.
Sounds fun at least.
Yeah. So that's it's sort of sliced like that, and then it just triggers as I think it's off the animation. I think.
I love those animation events, endlessly useful. So Sea of Thieves is in Unreal 4, isn't it? I think. Yeah, then wise for that. Yeah. Do you find, every now and then has there been any tracks where you've been like, oh, I really wanted to do this, but the engine or this has limited me from the kind of work I wanted to do? Or has it all been pretty, yeah, we can figure that out eventually?
Yeah, it has really.
Yeah.
It's certainly not the technology. It's probably the composer is the limit is.
I can't tell if you Daniel, I can't tell if you were trying to like sailing or selling. I'm slightly confused by that question. Could you just clarify? Has there ever been talk about allowing you to put your own music in Sea of Thieves, like someone can drop an MP3 in and it just happens as it's going, or are you kind of sort of wanting people to keep these little moments and stings to aid with gameplay? Has there been?
No, we're not. Yeah, kind of. Yeah, it's kind of. We haven't. No. I suppose it would. It potentially opens a bit of a legal kind of worm if somebody decides to upload a licensed piece of music. It's like run into problems then.
Nothing says piratey to me than pirated music,
Yeah, I suppose. Be the pirate you want to be. Selling.
He means like, so example, you can input, I suppose Lewis is asking if you have any plans of implementing a MIDI system where, for example, some games have like a playable instrument you can actually sit in your keyboard and plonk some tunes out on.
Who knows?
Or whether that was ever on the chopping board or anything like that.
Yeah, never say never. It would be quite cool. I know what you mean. Not like if you could. Yeah, I mean, it's quite complicated.
I've known one game to do that, and the issue is that not everyone's a musician, I find, with that.
Yeah.
Selling certain items have their own music.
Yes, that was intentional. Yeah, that we did.
Yeah.
As soon as I suppose that initially started with the companies. No, it was the different types of chest, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely. We started with kind of like your generic kind of sell something sting, and then we kind of did stuff for like the drunken chest or the Athena's chest and things like that.
Kind of more valuable, the grander the sound.
Yeah. And then you watch it in game and people just like cashing in constantly, and the trigger behind actually when the event happened. But
yeah. All the curse chests has a specific one, which is really cool. Yeah. Was there kind of like, when you were doing that, was it always you wanted to have a grand sound, or do you kind of go, oh, this chest is a bit eerie, this is a ghost chest, we need to make sure the sound is accompanyingly spooky, or was it just we want it to be triumphant?
It was just kind of what's the character of the chest, and because the sort of main riff was kind of wasn't it? That's the kind of this thing, and then we would kind of embellish that depending on the chest. Sometimes we changed. I think we changed melody at times as well.
Lewis asks, the Sovereign appeared in the Sea of Thieves comics, and now they're actually in the game. Do you find that the kind of writing or previous lore of characters comes into the music making process, or is it fairly, standalone? We give them the theme that we'd like.
No, I think with Sovereign, so the Sovereigns kind of use a version of the Captains of Adventure song. But I think we sort of thought it's the Sovereigns, and they sort of think they're better than everybody else. So why don't we put it on String Quartet and make it kind of feel a bit, I don't know, posh, I suppose.
They are slimy.
Yeah. So yeah, it's kind of, we had that. I suppose we had that sort of melody first, but then we kind of tailored it to them with the instrumentation.
Will the Sovereign's music be used for the Grand Maritime Union if they ever appear in the game? I assume that's one you can't answer.
It is.
Yeah. You can ask about things that have happened, but if we ask anything that's going to happen, it's going to be sorry, no. I'll wait for a few more questions. We're planning on ending at around 6, if that's okay with you, because we've got to set up our society, which I didn't plan for when we started this. But is there any kind of sound system, or not necessarily just in Sea of Thieves, but earlier, where you were really proud of, oh, this is something that I've done that works so well, like a tune or a character that's just really
I was really pleased. I don't know, the Jet Force Gemini, I don't know if you're familiar with that one.
I've heard a lot of people talk about it, but it was, I think, before I was 5, so I've never played it. And I don't
there's a tune on that called, I think it was one of the, it was Torfret Swamp, I think, for music. And I was really pleased with that, because it was one of those things where I just went, I thought, I'm not going to follow the grid. I'm not going to do to click. I'm just going to write something and just do kind of rubato and it's like one of those things and I kind of kept doing that in Jet Force, because it just felt like I don't know, just the whole kind of atmosphere. I was really pleased with that when it was sort of put alongside the level visuals. So there's that. Conquer, there was some moment. There's quite a few moments in Conquer. Quite pleased with so this is more of a sound design thing, but there's a whole sort of Saving Private Ryan bit in Conquer.
Yeah.
And when he sort of he gets off the boat and then he runs up the beach, and then you're getting the gunfire. So we took the decision not to do that with sound effects and do it from code, because it couldn't just get it sound right. Chris Seaver, the designer on it, slightly obsessed with Saving Private Ryan. That was kind of at the time. And we kept sort of listening to that whole sound design on that, the incredible way. And because Mike Currington, he was a software guy, audio software guy on Conquer, he got the Dolby Surround stuff, Pro Logic to work. So he gave me some, we sort of took a MIDI controller that wasn't being used, and at a certain value I could position it in the rears or left. I could do left or right, or I could stick things. So surround Pro Logic was left, right, center, rear. There was no left or right in the rear. It was just rear. I could do stuff like with that, and I could get Tracerfire to kind of, I could pan it and make it go into that. So we sort of took the decision that we would trigger all those sound effects through MIDI. So I would kind of get say, this is the sand texture with the sort of the impacts there. This is the sand the wood, the bullets hitting wood. This is the bullets hitting metal. and then I would get them to sound all kind of as close as I could to the kind of Private Ryan um, sound design. And then in game we would like on sort of our other areas where you go to this area and it would fade up this instrumentation with the MIDI files. So you would be playing the same tune, but it would play on a clarinet instead of a violin or something like that. We do that. We do that quite a lot on the N64.
I mean, Grant used that extensively in things like banjo.
So, and we did that on I suppose the first bit of the conker. One of the first tasks you do is with the beehive.
Yeah.
When you return it, the bees come out and they sing along. So as you go away, it turns back to the overworld tune. But as you go back to them, then it's the bee singing.
Because it was using quite a few of the games. They're like, what? How did you come across? Did you make your own sample for a bee instrument? Because
that was me with a trumpet mouthpiece through a kazoo. So but so for that, going back to that Private Ryan thing, so it was the same idea. It just wasn't playing music and musical instruments. It was just playing sound effects. So it would go, okay, you're stood on this surface, therefore we're going to switch to this MIDI channel. You stood by that metal structure there. We're going to switch to the metal impacts with all the whizzing around and in surround. So that was one of those sort of things you would traditionally sort of be using a MIDI file for music, but we actually used it for sound effects. I think I think that turned out better than it would have done if we'd have tried to do it just randomly triggering them in software.
You mentioned before that the shanty system was considered fairly early on in the game in production, due to how open and sandbox like the game was. Do you prefer to write kind of open-ended ambient pieces? Do you enjoy the more action-orientated music?
All of it, really. It's one of those things of like, it's nice after you've sort of come off the back of doing some sort of crash bang wallop epic stuff. It can be, you know, in the writing of that can be a bit sort of fatiguing. So it's very nice to then go and do a bit of ambient stuff, something a bit more gentler. So it's one of those things. It's kind of nice to switch around and do different bits and bobs. There's so much sort of variety in what we're sort of doing on that game.
Something I know I struggle with is you write, you know, you write back to back bombastic piece of music, and then you go, I'd really like to write this lovely gentle thing, but there's not really the room for it. Yeah.
So it's always nice to sort of, it's the same with doing like a trailer. It's kind of nice to just go and jump on to do a trailer for a bit and, you know, something to picture. It's kind of quite nice.
Adam asks, he says he's struggled with writing some of those ambient pieces in the past. Would you have any advice for kind of creating soundscapes and, you know, something that's not the focal point?
Yeah, I know what it means. It's hard, isn't it? Because I think there's always a kind of temptation to tinker with it and go, I can't hold that for that amount of time. I need to do something with it. I'm just having the nerve to hold it before you change to something else or start putting loads of little bits of detail in it. So I think the thing is just to sort of take a break and then come back to it and just, you know, do something else, come back, have a listen and that. But it's, you know, I think it's it's hard. I know what he means. The tendency is to try and put some more detail in and maybe some melody and stuff, and you kind of just want to, I mean, it's kind of, with Sea of Thieves, it's been one of those things where there's a lot of the ambient stuff is just, sometimes it's me just setting the Pro Tools in record and recording just some wild lines, not wild, just, you know, not to click or anything, just sort of playing around. I'm recording some stuff on the Hurdy for maybe about half an hour to an hour, and then just stopping that, going away, doing something else, then coming back to it, and then just picking the bits out that are passable. You know what I mean? That's not kind of that's kind of nice when you kind of get in that that mind of where you're not overly conscious of what you're playing. You're almost just sort of improvising, but just playing stuff and noodling. But then when you come back to listen to it, you go, oh, that's quite nice. That's something that you wouldn't normally come up
Your
with
playing ears versus your listening ears.
and
Yeah.
going through your sort of normal shapes. It's kind of that's the other thing about playing on these instruments that I'm not used to playing on. It's kind of you find that you come up with stuff that you wouldn't do when you sat at a piano keyboard. So that's kind of useful, and those kind of things. Those are, I suppose, that's the way I've done the sort of more ambient stuff in Sea of Thieves, is to play stuff, improvise it, and then come back it at a later date, listen to it, and go sort of find the sort of nuggets that you go, oh, there's something there, I quite like that, pull that out, and then have it in its own bit of timeline and add some other instrumentation to it and stuff like that. And then those are kind of all little bits like that, and then put them in Wise and let Wise do its own thing with them.
Something I'm curious about is how you essentially how you organize your thoughts, because obviously you've got so many things on the go, and you've got so many systems where tunes come into things. Have you got like an easy way of organizing them? Have you got like, oh, this is the folder of this sort of thing, and this is the...
No, it's just one big folder of stuff. There is kind of stuff like score, shanties, but then it kind of gets a bit messed up and stuff. And these are tall tales. These are, so sometimes it's hard to kind of because it's when did we release? We released in 2018, didn't we? So it's kind of sometimes you have to sort of look at the Wise file name and then search for it to then go find it, to then find the session.
Yeah,
that's the thing about the DAWs, isn't it? Everything's kind of at your fingertips. The old days where you used to have a multi-track tape and you had to get the put that back on and get the desk back up. It's like it's all instantaneous now. So it's but sometimes you do have to go, which session was that again? I can't remember which one that was. So you have to kind of go through Wise, find the file name, and then you can search for it, and you'll find it in the bounced folder, and then you can get, oh, it was that session there.
Daniel asks, how long does it take to fully produce a piece of Sea of Thieves? So from like when they say we need a piece to when it shows up in the game. I mean, you said you've got some things a whole year in advance.
Yeah. I don't know. It's kind of some stuff's very quick. Some things are kind of I've just got nothing here, and I'll have to come back to it. And some stuff can be, a couple of days, and you've got something fully formed and ready to go. Other times you can maybe spend a week on it trying to, and then it'll sit around until it's ready to go in. So yeah, and I suppose you kind of have, it's usually a few days to a week or so, maybe, depending on the complexity of it. And you might do version 1 of it and then try it in game and go, no, that doesn't work. I think a good example of that is some of the Skelly music when the Skellies pop out. I think the first pass of that I was like, didn't like what I did. So I didn't that
kind of biggest number for a version number you've had?
Oh yeah.
What's the worst case of that, I suppose?
It's usually the trailers, to be honest. Usually the trailers. It's usually the kind of, especially like E3, that kind of goes through all those.
Yeah.
You'll get a lot of kind of versions of that stuff. It's got better. I think I've maybe, especially now where we are with Sea of Thieves, it's kind of, you know where you're at with it in terms of what you need to do. So there's less, I suppose initially there's quite a lot of exploration and trying stuff, and then you kind of settle on what the sound is. So the turnarounds may be quicker.
I'm going to have to leave in a moment. So if we have any last questions, now or never. Something else to say. Yeah.
You there? Oh yeah, sorry.
Yeah, so I'm waiting for. I hope it's just anyone's got one last thing.
I thought I clicked
I thought you'd left by accident.
I was just checking Teams just to check nobody was after me for anything. But I'm okay.
Yeah. You find it's you never really get to sleep kind of workload, or is it more of a I've done my hours so long?
Pretty good. I know it didn't used to be like that in the old days, but it's now obviously the industry's grown up a lot since when I first started. It was sort of fairly new, so it's got a bit more kind of organised. No, it's pretty good. I mean, sometimes you might have to work a bit later and do the odd weekend, but generally it's pretty good. Crunchy's bad.
Yeah. The industry's
it's the thing with that is it's sort of diminishing returns. You might get lots of stuff done, but it's kind of, if you're just completely worn out, at some point you're not as productive. It just doesn't work like that. So lots of breaks. I think if trying not to burn out on one bit of music is good. I'm not always great on that bit of advice, but if you can have a few on the go, that's kind of good. But I'm in terms of like, I'm fortunate with working from home that I've got this separate space that I lock up on a night and I go over to my house. So I'm above the garage at the moment, and that's the same on the weekend. So I've been very, very fortunate through COVID and all that I've had this separate space that is a definite kind of, I'm not in the kitchen trying to do it, or in a somewhere else in the house. You know what I mean? It's a different building. So
holding the same as a kid your child walks in asking for help with the home. Yeah.
So it's a definite kind of space I can go to and also forget about. And the same goes for Ray. It's kind of like So we discourage that kind of burning out of hours now.
Didn't used to be no.
Didn't used to be like that. For sure. No.
6. Yeah. Just make an arcade game in 6 months. It's no issue. No.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you so much for giving us your time. Really, I know this. We've been trying to sort this out for a year, and it's been
that's about
yeah. Almost to the date, I think.
Yes.
And busy workload. So thank you so much for taking the time out to actually sit and talk with us. For those who are in our society, we'll be in room 509 in a few minutes. It's been genuinely insightful to kind of pick your brain for a bit.
It's been really good fun to chat about it all.
Cool. So thank you for stopping by. This will be uploaded at a later date. I'll maybe send you a link if you'd like. I'm gonna.
Well, enjoy.